Welcome, everybody, to tonight's DnDTime Talks, where we'll be discussing all things Dungeons & Dragons. I am your refreshed, relaxed, off of a week off host, Pete.
I'm your barely alive host, Jeremy.
So, Jeremy, how are you?
It's been a day, Pete. It's been a day. Oh, but I'm ready to talk about some druids.
My
hair is all over the place as always. Whatever. It's gonna be bad today.
I am also ready to talk about some druids. That is today's topic. For the next hour or so, we're going to be going through and breaking down everything that you need to know about the druid. We're going to be going over the RP opportunities, the class feel. We're going to be talking about the mechanics. We got everything. So if you have anything that you would like to say about the druid or anything in general about D&D or comments, let us know in chat. Or if you have a topic that you'd like to let us know about in the future and have us talk about, just speak up in Twitch chat and we'll be answering people's questions and have fun hanging out.
And hit us up on Twitter. Give us those sweet follows, all that other stuff. Let me know if Pete's voice and camera synced. I think it is, but I don't know. And yeah,
absolutely.
With that, let's dive right into the topic, Pete. You want to start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Today's topic is the fourth in our class breakdown series, the Druid. The Druid it's an interesting class. Unlike, say, the Cleric or the Bard, which I think have very big followings, I think the Druid is one of the more very niche classes. Probably the most niche of all the classes because it fills a very specific archetype. If you're playing a Druid, it means that you have a character that has a very strong connection to nature. It's pretty much impossible to play a Druid that is in some way not connected to nature, because this class specific spells that they get usually tie into the control of plants, abilities that let you talk to animals and things like that. The Druid is the third of the full spellcasters that are non-arcane spellcasters, so I think it's also the last of the full spellcasters that are non-arcane spellcasters, and they got a whole bunch of cool abilities in their subclasses, in particularly one subclass that I think will be giving more love than another one. But one
which
subclass,
is, of course, the land druid. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, it is the Moon Druid, which can turn the Druid into a very powerful tank. But it's really fun. I like the Druid. I don't know if you like the Druid, Jeremy, but I know you've played a lot of Druid.
Yeah, Pete, I've played a whole bunch of Druid. I've played like 2.5 years of Druid. I played a lot of Druid.
You played a lot of Druid. Do you like the Druid?
I do like the Druid. I think there's a lot of interesting things. Unlike, and part of the Druid is they sort of have this more restrictive RP space because of their more deep connection with nature, which really gives a different central plot than most other. Or central tension, rather, at least for the character, than other classes, where a cleric might be dealing with good versus evil, or a fighter is power versus weakness. In the Druid, you're talking about the chaos that is wilderness and nature, and the law, which is civilization, which is a very interesting but much more difficult theme, as there aren't as many iconic things to point to. At this point in the conversation here, Pete and I will usually point to all sorts of different things from popular culture, TV, that you might liken a Druid to, or liken the class to. And with Druids, there just really aren't a lot of them.
I was actually thinking about that as well, Jeremy. I was trying to come up with a good example. The most Druid character that I could think of was, if anyone has seen the making of the Hobbit movie, the most recent Hobbit movie by Peter Jackson, Radagast the Brown, I think is the most Druidish character I've seen in any kind of cinema or book in recent memory.
And actually, we have a great comment in chat from Ivalon. I'm very, very excited to see everything he's got to say about this, but before we get too far into it, I think it's important to get this off my chest. # my problem with Druids. A lot of people play them wrong, because fun's never wrong, but they play them more as a nature cleric, and there's a whole, divine domain for clerics about that. So it's interesting. We're going to probably take a couple of minutes to go over really what is the big difference between those two. So
yeah, for sure.
I guess at this point, Pete, why would anyone want to watch us talk about the Druid? To whom could this conversation be beneficial?
To people who want to play Druids, of course. Hopefully, as we say about every class, by the time we're done talking about it, you'll feel maybe like, yeah, I could get into this. Maybe this is something I would want to play at some point. But if you want to play a Druid, it means that you want to be into the nature aesthetic. Like I said before, like every other class, I feel like you can find a way to like reshape the class and kind of work it to make it fit your own themes and ideas. But the Druid, it's so the idea of nature is so heavily baked into just the raw mechanics of the game that you kind of have to do that. Or if you're working around and trying to come up with something else to do with it, you probably just want to be playing something different. Like there's probably a class that can do that much better. But if you like nature, if you're into that sort of thing, I think the Druid is really cool cast class. They got lots of great spell casting options, and they have beast shape, which we'll talk about, so you get to turn into animals. Beast Boy is a Druid, also. Adrian P in chat said Animorphs are Druids. Yeah, they're pretty cool. I mean, they got the beast shapes. Shapes.
It's very interesting. People in the chat already are really grabbing and latching on to that beast shape, which is an iconic, at least in 5th edition, defining feature of the Druid, their ability to transform into beasts. But before we jump into that, let's hit the very basics on what Druids do. Right, Pete? So Druids are spellcasters. They are primarily a spell casting class. That being said, they are a full spellcaster, unlike a paladin, which is a half caster and gets fewer spells. Druids go the whole 9 yards. They get 9th level spell, whole 9 yards, 9th level spells.
They get Storm of Vengeance.
They get Storm of Vengeance, one of the least powerful but very cool 9th level spells.
When we get to 9th level spells, I'll mention that one because I really
exactly.
like it.
They're full spellcasters. They get a whole suite of spells, and what that means is for them, the bulk of their ability is supposed to come from their spells. However, Druids have a strange conundrum in terms of with their spell options, and we'll go through the level by level. They lack a lot of instantaneous bang impactful spells. A lot more of their abilities are sustained abilities over time. And so if you're looking for immediate impact from your spells, you're gonna really probably feel wanting, especially if you have another full spellcaster like a cleric or a wizard or a sorcerer or even a warlock in your party. They're gonna feel like they have much more immediately impactful abilities, whereas your Druid abilities tend to be more supporty, I help my friends, or over a long term. Like I'm calling lightning for 10 turns from the sky.
Yeah. And that's another thing about, like, for example, you look at Call Lightning, which is a spell that is amplified when you're out in a natural thunderstorm. So that kind of re-emphasizes the role. The Druids are very powerful when they're in their own kind of environment. And I think that's where they really have the best to shine, is when they're doing the things that they are good at. Which, things like talking to trees, which always ends up being really useful when you talk to trees. They usually know everything about your predicaments. So in terms of abilities, Druid gets light and medium armor proficiencies, but Druids can't wear metal, so you'll never be able to, for the medium armor, you'll never be able to have chainmail. Or wait, chainmail is heavy. What's the big medium? Scale?
The big medium armor is breastplate.
Breastplate. You'll never be able to do breastplate. Maybe scale mail if you have maybe like a dragon scale armor, but for the most part, your medium armor will be hide and your simple armor will be, a leather type. And they're also not able to use shields. They're able to use shields, but not shields made of metal. They're able to use a suite of different simple weapons, things like sickles, quarterstaves, some pretty simple stuff. It's not the focus of the class, so they don't get a lot of choices, but they're pretty flavorful. And if you're building a Druid, what you're going to want to take is your wisdom. Your next best stat is probably going to be Constitution to help with concentrations and to just boost your health. Constitution's good on everybody. But after that, it's kind of an anything goes for building a druid in terms of stats. Maybe you have some kind of fancy build in mind where you want to hit and grab a strength or dex, but pretty much anything works.
Yep, and we actually had a funny conversation in or point in chat. Trees are highly social creatures. We're going to talk about that later. It's something I really wanted to strike on, about the druid's abilities to actually just talk with plants later on. But early on, immediately off the bat, druids they don't really fill any role. As a druid within a party of players, you could, if you go moon druid, fill that sort of tank role, transforming into large beasts like bears or giant octopuses or whatever. And if you don't go Moon Druid and you go the Circle of the Land, which we'll talk about once they hit level 3, or I think it's level 2 for the Druid, you really don't fill any role. You're just kind of a general supporty spellcaster. You're well-rounded. You can do a lot of things. You have combat abilities. You have
sort of that Swiss Army knife 5.
You have Healing Word, which can just mean you take one healing spell and you can, now that you're the healer for the party too. You have a ton of utility, but there's nothing that you really dominate at.
I would, with the exception of course, if you're a Moon Druid.
Unless you're a Moon Druid,
you're a very good tank.
And damage dealer. And spellcaster. Yeah. Interesting. Huh. Let's talk about the roleplay space.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Like I said, kind of originally, Druid is, I think, the most restricted roleplay space out there. There are, I'm sure, a few different variants and ways that you could flavor it. I think Ivalon mentioned in chat before that you could play it as more of like kind of a shamanic thing, and maybe just sort of you're channeling your druid powers through spirits or something like that. But at the end of the day, just the effects of your abilities have a direct tie-in with that natural environment. So really the way that you start to make your druid interesting and figure out how you want your druid to work is how you interact with nature, what aspects of nature you want to embody in your character's kind of personality and the things that they believe. When I think of the archetypal druid, and I think that's kind of the one that everyone pictures, is sort of this hermit. They'll usually kind of live in the forest before pre-campaign. Their backstory usually involves them being isolated in a forest for a long time. They care for nature. They help animals, sick animals live in the forest. They're kind of quiet, maybe a little bit eccentric, but they're usually good-natured. Now, that's kind of the archetypical druid.
And it's funny that you say that, Pete, because that is true in 5th edition. That is the quintessential 5th edition druid. But as Ivalon's saying in chat, going back to previous editions, for example, talking about that they won't use metal armor. That's a holdover from previous editions where druids wouldn't use any sort of man-made tools. They were truly this force of nature, of chaos versus the civilization of society. And it's interesting because that's absolutely fallen off in recent editions, to the point where the only last vestige of it, even in the class, is that you can't wear metal armor. You can even use metal weapons. You just can't wear metal armor. It's interesting.
I wasn't actually familiar with that history behind it. It's interesting because I mostly have played in 5th, that they decided to keep that in, despite not flavoring the rest of the class in that way.
Yeah, the druid, more than any other class, has undergone the most dramatic shift in its identity throughout the editions. And that's kind of why you don't have that strongly established archetype that you might have for like a paladin. You have a strong idea of what a paladin looks like, what a paladin is, because they never rewrote what a paladin is. But yeah, sorry, going on. The 5th edition druid is definitely, like you were saying, that kind of kooky, eccentric.
Yeah, kind of a wacky, lives in the forest, sort of loves nature. But there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of come up with different ways to flavor your druid and make them fit your own style. A few good things to think about. the environment that your druid is from. I think the way in which you interact with nature would be largely affected as a druid by what type of climate you're from. Maybe you come from the desert where your entire life is spent weathering like sandstorms and surviving on like no water. In which case, that would make a much different kind of character would come out of that environment than a druid who's from like a lush tropical island where nature provides everything for them and they live in harmony with the world around them. More of an adversarial versus a friendly relationship there. Similarly, you could look at, where they fit into the animal kingdom, so to speak. Are they more like wolf-like? Are they ferocious? Do they like roll with the pack? Are they more rabbit-like? Are they, apex predator, more lion-like? Think about kind of what style, more carnivorous, more herbivorous. I've never used that conjugation of the word. I don't think herbivorous is a word.
I'm pretty sure that's definitely not a word. But yeah, I mean, thinking about all sorts of things are super, super important. You could be sort of this druid of decay, of death, of fungus. You could be a druid that's much more the stalking predator. And these are kind of different things that you can channel and really think about when you're playing your character. How do they act? And maybe they were literally raised by wolves. And as a result, how would they think as a result of this very strange lifestyle? The real challenge with RPing a druid, more so than any other class, I'd say, or usually more so, is you have to put yourself in a very different mindset with the druid that you don't necessarily have to do on a more civilized character. Herbivorous is a word, Farfel. Thank you.
Man,
Pete, good work. You knew a word that you didn't even know.
I invented that word into existence, is how I'm going to think of it.
And actually, if you're even more ballsy with the direction you're going, you could pick one of the elemental planes and roll that way. So
yeah, absolutely. You could become maybe a stone druid, and you can just embody the element. Maybe you're just very resolute, unflinching, stubborn, or you're constantly shifting like the tides. There's a ton of ways that you could flavor your character after literally any aspect of nature, kind of embodying it in your personality and the way that you play your character. So I think it's a really fun class to role play and to think about. Usually, in my own taste, the classes that are more restrictive, I actually have more fun building in kind of the smaller box than the really big open one. I don't know about you, Jeremy.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. So let's start talking about what the druids actually get and what stuff they can do. Because I think the way you build a druid will have a huge impact on how they play. Like, you get all your spells, obviously, because they are a prepared caster, which we'll get into in a sec. But, whether or not you go Moonderland has a really big impact, I think, on the playstyle there.
Yeah. Well, and speaking about that, it makes such a huge difference, but you're not going to get that choice until level 2. Because at level 1, all you really get is your spell casting. And as a druid, you are a spellcaster. Like every full spellcaster, you're going to get 2 first level spells at level 1, and you're also going to get 2 cantrips. A lot of their power comes from spellcasting, their versatility, and they have some really cool, unique cantrips that other classes don't even have have the ability to access outside of some niche scenarios. Pete, what are a few of those cantrips?
Cantrips, they get Druidcraft, which is basically the druid equivalent of Prestidigitation or Thaumaturgy, which basically it means you can do kind of minor magical effects. You can make a seed blossom, or you can know what the weather is going to be. Little stuff like that. It's fun. I like it a lot. You get Guidance, Mending, Poison Spray, Produce Flame, Poison Spray and Produce Flame, obviously damaging cantrips, kind of tell by the name what they do. Resistance, which isn't that great. Shillelagh, which is a really cool one. You can turn your quarterstaff or any kind of club or object that you carry essentially into a magic druid whacking stick. It makes it do magical damage unless you hit based on your wisdom rather than your regular rather than your regular stat like strength that would probably be for the weapon that you were using. So Shillelagh is a cool spell, and then they also get Thorn Whip, which can like pull someone towards you. I really like the Druid cantrips overall. I think they get a great cantrip suite.
Yeah, absolutely. And Thorn Whip especially being a cantrip that lets you pull things around. I mean, you can use cantrip to save your allies in certain circumstances. It's a really interesting and versatile option, if you don't mind hurting people a little bit. Just a little.
Yeah, that's got a lot of flair. There's a lot of cool things that you can do there. That one for sure.
It's a super, like a great visceral image of just like whoosh, you throw out the vine and it wraps around someone. It's very druidy. But yeah, like the cleric that we spoke of last week, druids know all of their spells, and that means no matter, or with the exception of the cantrips, they know every spell that can ever cast. It's just they can only prepare a certain number of spells based on their wisdom and their level and all that kind of good stuff. So from day to day, druids can swap out what abilities they have, and one of the great things about being a druid is even if you make a mistake, you prepare a spell you find out you don't like, it doesn't work the way you thought it did, whatever, that's never going to bite you, because the next day you can just change it.
Yeah, it feels great. I love playing the prepared classes. Cleric, Druid, and Paladin, I think, are the only ones. But I don't know, it just feels really good. I guess Wizards too.
Yeah, going out on a limb, being able to go out on a limb and try that like weird option feels very good, very rewarding.
Druids get ritual casting, which we talked about when we did the cleric breakdown. We'll just touch on it again here. Essentially, if you have a spell that is a ritual, you can cast it as a ritual, which means you take an extra 10 minutes and you cast the spell without expending a spell slot. So since you know all of your spells, you always have these rituals prepared. So you just have essentially this whole other thing in your toolkit.
You do have to have the spell prepared.
Yes.
In order to cast it. So if you didn't prepare the spell, then you can't ritual cast it. It's one advantage that the wizard's ritual casting has over the other ones. But sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. But you are correct. So you have to have the spell prepared. But if you do, it's just this extra tool that you have in your arsenal that you can use. And they're mostly for out of combat spells. You won't ever see like a ritual casted fireball. But small effects like the ones they get at level 1 include like detect magic. So that's just something you can do if you have that ritual prepared, it's cool. Ritual casting, I think, like preparing spells, feels very good.
Yeah, and so now we're going to talk about their first level spells. These are spells that you're going to use a lot early on when playing a druid. In your first 3 or 4 levels, these are going to become your signature kind of abilities. And there are 2, I think, that are druid exclusive, meaning without working. And those spells are Handbook, I believe.
Jeremy, you are
so there are 2 kind of druid quintessential abilities. And Tangle is a big massive
Jeremy, you are botting out really bad. So let me talk about first level spells for a second.
That's bad.
And see if maybe you're back.
Uh-oh. Peter, are you back?
I think I am back. I think that was that was a pretty bad bot. Pretty bad bot session there.
Discord, as my upload is totally fine. So sorry about that, everyone.
Discord having some problem. Discord, Lord of Chaos, as always. We apologize for that.
Praise their blind hatred of all things creative.
Indeed. Anyway, Jeremy, you were talking about level 1 spells that are druid exclusive.
My apologies, everyone. Yeah, I was going to say there are, I think, only 2 spells that are exclusive to the druid. And those are Goodberry and Goodberry and Tangle. Entangle is really cool, just like Vine Whip or Thorn Whip. It creates a big, massive vines that can restrain people. It's a very powerful ability at level 1, actually, often overlooked. and it's right on theme, which is great. And Goodberry is a super efficient healing ability if you're out of combat, and in combat is still very good. It allows you to conjure 10 little berries that each heal 1 point of health. You can only eat one at a time as an action, but this is a great way, especially at early levels, to say way before like at the beginning of the day, I take a level 1 spell, I make Goodberry, I give everyone a Goodberry, and now every single character in the party can bring an ally up from unconsciousness. It's like
it makes it so you are no longer the only one responsible for doing that.
Well, and if you go unconscious, now your allies can get you up. It really unlocks that like power of healing potions early on. Because one of the big powers of that is when someone goes down, you bring them back up and swing the combat back into your advantage. And that's a very useful ability.
And the Goodberries last for 24 hours, so you can do that any time. Another cool thing about that is when we get to level 2, if you've used your beast shape, your allies can still do healing while you're in beast shape and not able to cast spells.
Yeah, exactly. There are a bunch of other spells that druids get at level 1. Animal Friendship, Charm Person, Create or Destroy Water, Cure Wounds, Detect Magic, Detect Poison and Disease, Fairy Fire, Fog Cloud, Healing Word. Healing Word's the king. Jump, Long Strider, Purify Food and Drink, Speak with Animals, and Thunderwave.
Speak with Animals is also
Speak with Animals
also
is
a ritual. A ritual as well. So I was gonna say it's just a ritual as well. So if you have Speak with Animals prepared, you can just always take 10 minutes and then talk to the birds and the trees or whatever it is that you're into as a druid.
Yeah, and we have Avalon in chat mentioning Fairy Fire. It's actually right on our list here, stuff to talk about. Very powerful support spell that empowers all of your allies to hit the enemy, to be able to hit more frequently. Makes you really feel like it's one of those abilities that even though it doesn't do any damage, you feel awesome because you cast it and you see all of your friends are now hitting all the time and they feel really good about it. They're real excited. And you can look at that and be like, yeah, I'm the reason you're all happy. I'm the best. And everyone appreciates you. And it feels
if
good.
you have a rogue in your party, they always get their sneak attack if someone's fairy fired because they have that advantage. There's a lot of benefits to that spell for sure. It's fun.
But yeah, and like Pete was saying, a bunch of rituals: Detect Magic, Detect Poison and Disease, Purify Food and Drink, and Speak with Animals. So those are all pretty decent ones. And like we said before, because druids know all of their spells, you can swap out. You can just day to day figure out, well, I want to try out using Thunderwave today. And if I don't like it, it's not my style, I'll change it. You can just do that. And
so great. I think that covers pretty much everything for level 1. Want to get to the first druid power spike, or the first 50% if you take the right subclass druid power spike?
Yeah, level 2 is the biggest. I mean, it's a huge power spike, but it's also the most important choice you're ever going to make as a druid. And Pete,
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Because you're going to have to be choosing between one of two things: your druid circle, the circle of the moon, or the circle of the land. And one of those is really powerful, and one of those offers a lot of niche utility. And we'll talk about the benefits of the circle. Well, we'll talk about why you would want to play Circle of the Land a little bit. I don't mean to sound too biased in terms of, I am pretty biased about which one I think you should pick, because I think one's a lot more fun to play because it makes you powerful. But we'll go into what the kind of RP benefits of picking Circle of the Land are. But before we get into that, we need to, I think, explain what the wild shape is.
Are you still saying words?
Yeah, I am still saying words. Could you not hear me, or was I a robot?
Sounds like you just cut out for a second, but I hear you totally fine now.
What I'm saying is that before we get into the difference between the two, we're going to talk about the wild shape.
Yeah, wild shape is pretty much the corest feature you're going to get on Druid. It's not quite as core as like a Barbarian's Rage, for example, just because the Druid has their spellcasting to augment it. But it's a super iconic feature in 5th edition, and it's the ability that lets druids transform into animals. They can turn into bears, birds, all sorts of different things. and those are generally very, very powerful.
Yes.
So basically, the base part about Wild Shape is you can use it twice per long rest, which is very good. In most Dungeons and Dragons campaigns in 5th edition, you're going to have 2, maybe 3 combat encounters per day. That's like the standard adventuring day. That's not what Wizards of the Coast wants it to be, but that's what it is. That's
kind of what it is in terms of practical play, yeah.
In terms of the way people actually play the game, it's about 2 or 3. And so you're usually going to have your Wild Shape available to use. If you are just a normal druid before you pick your class, your subclass, you can transform into a CR 1/4 or lower beast, specifically a beast. So you can't turn into like a goblin. You can't turn into a different human. You can turn into like a squirrel. Or what is another?
A wolf. A wolf is, I think, a powerful example.
Very iconic CR 1/4 beast. And at CR 1/4, it's helpful. It's not bad to have the extra hit points of a wolf. Wolves are strong when you get this ability at level 2. And it's generally all right. It's not
lots of kind of small insects and things that you can take, which offer a lot of utility. And for scouting, maybe you creep in as a mouse or a rat or a spider, and you can like hang on the walls or underneath and eavesdrop on people. It offers a lot of utility options. Not a ton in terms of actual combat prowess. The wolf is, I think, the most powerful one. It's not maybe about 13 hit points. It does a couple d4 damage, I think, something along those lines.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about this is when you transform, you retain all of your mental facilities, all of your mental ability scores, your intelligence, all of your proficiencies, and so you are just a strictly better version of that animal, even though you do gain their physical abilities, which are usually going to be better than yours. The interesting thing about this ability, I can transform into animals. The question then is, what animals can I transform into? And in the basic rules, there's no answer to that question. It's entirely GM discretion. You talk to your dungeon master about what they feel is appropriate. A lot of them will just say you can turn into whatever. Other ones will say you have to have seen the creature first.
Yep.
And if you're going to play a druid, and you're going to play a land druid that focuses and specializes in transforming into beasts, have that conversation with your game master before you start the game.
Yeah, you want to be on the same page as them for sure, because that'll have a huge impact on how much fun it is to play for you.
Well, it'll also change how powerful it is.
Yep.
The Circle of the Land Druid, given free reign to transform into anything, is absurdly powerful.
Circle of Moon,
my apologies, is extremely powerful. But limited only by things that they've seen, can be very, very weak, depending on what goes on. There are some rules in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, I think, right, Pete?
There are some rules in Xanathar's Guide. We don't usually mention the Xanathar's Guide rule, but if you do have access to it, there's a whole list of animals that you would likely have seen and be able to transform into based on region, which is, if you and your DM are having kind of a hard time agreeing on something, it's a pretty good resource to use. So if you have access to Xanathar's, I recommend checking that out. It's under the Druid subclass section.
And those are optional rules. Just because those exist doesn't mean you have to change the way you play a Druid. If you and your party, your friends play it so you can transform into anything and you have fun doing it, that is the rule. You do what you guys have fun doing. Guys and gals. But anyway, let's talk a little about the circles, because that's the next most important thing you're going to get at this level, is you're going to choose your circle. Pete, what are the 2 circles and what do they do?
Let's start off by talking about the Circle of the Land. This is a druid circle that focuses on your spell casting. Overall, as you move through the class, this is the one that we are kind of going to be telling you is a little bit weaker than the other one, or I guess significantly. But you get these things when you take it at level 2. You're going to get an extra cantrip. So you just get another cantrip to pick out. Cool. You're going to get your circle spells. Essentially, you pick what is your home terrain, like we were talking about a little bit before. Maybe you're from the tundra, maybe you're from the mountains, maybe you're from the swamp. And then you get some extra spells that are always prepared for you that allow you to flavor your character a little bit more for your home region. So let's say you're the tundra one. I think you get at one point, a little bit down the road, you get the spell Cone of Cold. You get like Sleet Storm. You get these icy kind of spells that reflect your home, you reflect your birthplace, or whatever it is that you want to show about your character. So it can add a lot of flavor and some extra options for your character for sure. And then the biggest thing that you get is called Natural Recovery. What it essentially does is when you take a short rest instead of a long rest, you can get some of your expended spell slots back. Wizards have a similar ability called Arcane Recovery, but the way that Natural Recovery works, well, basically it's a few spell slots. I think it is combined level equal to less than or half of your Druid level. So at level 2, when you take a short rest, you can get 1 expended first level spell back. It's useful. How effective that is kind of depends, much like we were talking about before with the beast shapes, on what kind of game you're playing. It's a lot more powerful in a game where you're going through a lot of encounters and use a lot of short rests. It's not quite as effective, but still okay in a game where you're doing more kind of traditional 1 or 2 encounters, and then you're taking a long rest after it. But it is a pretty decent ability.
If you're delving through a mega dungeon, it's so helpful. But if you're just doing overland travel or a couple of small encounters, it's really not going to. It'll come up every once in a while, and you'll be happy for it, especially at early levels. But you'll probably forget about it once you hit 5th or 6th or 7th level. You'll just forget you have the ability because you use it so rarely.
So Jeremy, do you want to take Moon, and then we'll go back to?
You're giving me all the good ones.
Yeah, take the good one, man.
Well, one last thing before we jump totally away from Circle of Land. A lot of those extra spells that you get from Circle of the Land, we mentioned earlier that Druid spells tend to lack that bang, that instantaneous like wham, and instant impact. The Circle of the Land, their extra spells tend to give you that. So Pete mentioned Cone of Cold. That is an instant impact, really high damage, brutal spell. And that's something that Druids have nothing even really like otherwise. So that is one kind of advantage to the Circle of the Land that the Circle of the Moon wouldn't get. But anyway, the Circle of the Moon. The Circle of the Moon is all about turning into beasts. You're going beast mode.
So fun.
And yeah, it's incredibly powerful. At level 2, I would go so far as to say it is broken. It breaks the game
by
in
far
a
the
bad
strongest
way.
thing at level 2.
First of all, it overrules the minimum beast challenge rating that you can transform into. Normally, under Wild Shape, you can only transform into a challenge rating 1/4 creature. However, the Circle of the Moon allows you to transform into challenge rating 1 creatures. That amps up immensely what kind of creature you can be. Probably the most powerful is the brown bear, which for level 2, suddenly having multi-attacks and an incredible to hit and doing tons of damage, having in the 30s, probably higher than that, actually. I don't remember how much the brown bear has. I can crack it open.
Oh, I wrote it down.
So I write down how much health it had.
Yep. Wow. So with the brown bear, because the brown bear is the quintessential choice, at level 2, you can think of it, if you're going to use your B shape the most technically optimal way and become brown bear twice, the brown bear has 34 health, which means that at level 2, since you can use that ability twice and it refreshes and it doesn't take away from your regular health, you essentially get a pool of 68 extra hit points at level 2. And the average damage, assuming you hit with both of your attacks on your multi-attacks, is a 20 damage per round on the multi-attack. So you are the most effective tank and the most effective damage dealer all of a sudden.
And here's
crazy.
Why that's actually a bad thing. The reason that's a bad thing is if you're playing in a game with other martial characters, martial meaning they use swords and shields, they're fighters, they're monks, they're rogues, they're not going to have any fun with you being just way better than them at everything.
Yeah.
Same with like if you're with the barbarian or someone who just is more of a dedicated tank. When you're just that much better than all of your allies put together, they're going to have a bad time. At least there's a good chance. Maybe not. Maybe your DM throws incredibly powerful things at you that you absolutely need everyone. But this is one of the times where the feature is too good.
Yeah. And keep in mind that this changes. It doesn't stay this good for the entirety of the game until the very end. But
I would even disagree. Yeah. It's still not that good up there.
I mean, I'm talking about it at the capstone.
Oh, I know. I still don't think that's actually as good as you do, but we can chat about that later.
Oh, yeah, we'll talk about that when we get there.
Thank you, Angel Rose, for following, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this ability is so impactful early on, being able to transform into bigger creatures. Additionally, your beast shapes refresh on a short rest, which is huge. You can use it way more often. You only need to rest for an hour to get both of them back, which means you're very rarely going to run out of beast shapes. And you can beast shape as a bonus action, which is incredibly powerful. And you can use those stupid spell slots that you don't care about anymore because you're a bear now to heal yourself while you're a bear. So, holy crap, this is the full-featured, I want to anamorph and kill people kind of class. And it is really good at it. And if there's a situation where you can't use it, you can always still just be a regular druid and spellcast. That's the main thing. The reason I'd almost always recommend taking the moon druid over the land druid is if you can be this awesome new thing as a moon druid, and you can fall back to being 80 to 90% of what the land druid is. So would you rather be incredible and 90% of the other thing, or would you rather just be 100% of the other thing, which is the land druid? So it's hard for me to rationalize recommending the land druid most of the time.
And the reason, if you're going to pick land druid, the reason why I think you should be picking it is not because you think it has a lot of power, because comparatively it does not, but because you just think it's cool and you like the flavor of that. Like you want those spells from your particular domain because, like the Tundra one again, you want that hold person. Because you imagine yourself freezing people in ice and you always want to have that prepared. So think about why you want to play the land druid if you're going to play it. Because there's no like wrong choice. I mean, it's still a fun way to play and it's still, fairly effective. It's just doesn't offer power like the moon druid does.
Yeah, exactly. And it's especially interesting looking back to previous editions where the druid was more like a ranger and had a beast companion and stuff. It'd be interesting if the land druid had that, but it doesn't in 5e, which is just unfortunate. And it's funny, we have a great conversation in chat here. Trans Kitten says, anyways, I was going to say, when I play the druid, I go for DPS tank with a side of heals. I go Circle of the Moon and multi-class barbarian if I can. If you want to be the most overpowered thing in the game, 2 levels in druid, 1 level in barbarian. At level 3, nothing can kill you. You are gonna go kill everything.
That level 3 combo can defeat anything up through level 5, maybe, of something else. I don't know. It can destroy.
It's some serious DM bullshit if you're even remotely challenged and you do that.
Yep. It's really good. So let's move on to level 3, which is where druids will be hitting their caster spike, as do all casters at level 3. This feels good for you regardless of what subclass you picked. You got 4 first level spells and 2 second level spells. Your total number of spells has doubled in a single instant. That's it. You got tons of new stuff. Some of the examples of spells that you get. For second level spells, you now have access to things like Animal Messenger, Bark Skin, Beast Sense, Dark Vision, Enhance Ability, Find Traps, Flame Blade, gust of wind, flaming sphere, heat metal, hold person, lesser restoration, locate animals, plants, locate object, moonbeam, pass without a trace, protection from poison, and spike growth.
The ability is pass without trace, not pass without a trace. Come on, get with the game.
Pass without trace.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of Druid exclusive spells in there. They vary in usefulness. Some of them are very good. Heat metal and moonbeam being two of the like MVP abilities in there. Spike growth is a very criminally underutilized ability, in my opinion.
Yeah, very good. Really cool. Situationally. Really good spell. Another spell that you get, obviously you get Hold Person. That's a classic. It's just a powerful effect. For rituals, you get Animal Messenger, Beast Sense, and Locate Plants and Animals, or Locate Animals or Plants. So those are your ritual options. But the spell that they get that is probably, it's one of the most effective utility spells in the game, and that is Pass Without Trace. Pass Without a Trace, essentially in an area of effect, grants you and the people around you, I can't remember the exact radius, a +10 to your stealth rolls.
You are the knight.
Yes. It essentially guarantees that your party will succeed on stealth. I mean, I'm sure there are situations where that doesn't happen, but it is an incredible boon. I actually think that the spell is too strong. I kind of wish it was just grants advantage or something along those lines. But it is a very powerful utility effect.
And yeah, this kind of harkens into the general design of 5th edition, emphasizing advantage and disadvantage over flat bonuses. Because the spell offers a flat bonus, it stacks with advantage. And
yeah, that's the problem there.
Devastatingly effective. It is very good for a level 2 spell. That's all I'm gonna say. It's very good. I am the Knight Pete. So yeah, that's what you get at level 3. Level 4, you get your ability score increased. Pretty standard. You're gonna get another cantrip, whatever, a bunch to choose from. They're real cool. And Pete, it is glub glub glub.
Fish time. It's fish time. You can now become fish when you use your beast shape, regardless of whether you are the moon or land druid. For the moon druid, that opens up the giant octopus is kind of, I think, the go-to OP fish that you can become. But there's tons of swimsuit creatures, just crocodiles and alligators and all sorts of aiders and stuff to look at. It's cool. It's fun. You can now breathe underwater with your beast shapes.
The go-to OP fish. Interesting. I've never heard that one before.
Go-to OP fish.
But yeah, one of the limitations, actually, I don't know if we mentioned it earlier. One of the limitations on Wild Shape is you cannot transform into a creature with a swim speed or a creature with a fly speed. And at that level 4, that's where they get rid of one of those limitations and say, yeah, you know what, you can swim now. I don't know why.
Maybe down the road they'll get rid of the next limitation. Maybe.
That'd be weird. But anywho, our next level is level 5. At level 5, you are going to get the biggest power spike for every caster except for you. It's just a pretty good power spike for you. You're going to get level 3 spells. In this kind of level 3 echelon of incredibly powerful abilities, the wizard gets things like Fireball or Lightning Bolt, massive, impactful abilities. However, you are going to get more balanced kind of abilities. They're not bad. It's just compared with the impact of Fireball, they're not as strong. You're going to get spells like Call Lightning, which is an ongoing ability that lets you call lightning down from a storm cloud you summon in the sky. You're going to get Conjure Animals, which is always done incorrectly and not fun when done correctly. Conjuring is bad in 5th edition, or it's dumb. You're going to get a spell called Daylight, which is basically hard counters vampires. Really, it hard counters vampires. You're going to get the Spell Magic, which is just good. Feign Death, which is funky. I like Feign Death. Meld into Stone, which is weird. You really need to read that spell to get it. We can't explain it to you. Plant Growth, which is a really cool ability that allows you...
a lot of RP flavor in that spell.
Plant Growth, has 2 options. You can either use it instantly in combat to create a huge area of difficult terrain to slow down your enemies. Or you can do it over the course of 8 hours and cause all plants within like a mile or something to bloom, which is really cool. It lets you like commune with nature and give it life.
It lets you like save farming communities that were on the brink of starvation.
Precise, exactly. You get to be that hero that brings in the nature. Protection from energy, sleet storm, speak with plants, water breathing, water walk, wind walk, and one not on there actually is tidal wave.
Tidal wave?
Wind wall. My mistake.
Wind wall.
Not wind wall.
Should tidal wave?
I believe tidal wave
be on there. Is tidal wave elemental maybe? Because I pulled it off of the I pulled these off of the player's handbook. So tidal wave is another cool druid spell. There are more spells for druid that we're not talking about, which are in some of the expansion books. Elemental Evil, Xanathar's Guide, I'm sure has some in there. Check those out if you're interested in getting some more spell options. There are some very cool ones in there. I know, Jeremy, there was the first level spell we didn't talk about, Absorb Elements. That's your one of your favorites of all time.
But yeah, one of the spells, since we wanted to, there are 2 spells that you get at this 5th level, 2 third level spells that I think are really, or 3, I think that are really important to talk about. First, I want to talk about Speak with Plants. You are always, no matter what, when you cast Speak with Plants, you're going to confuse and confound your dungeon master. Let them know that like you have this spell if you ever plan on using it. It's really weird because technically plants can't see and have like a 1 intelligence. So figure out and make sure you and your dungeon master are on the same page with that if you're going to use it. That's all I'm going to say about that. But the next big spell is Conjure Animals.
Yes.
Conjure Animals is you want to conjure things because it sounds cool. And there's the rules as written way to do it, which is your dungeon master decides what animals show up. Which feels bad. It can feel bad. You have to trust your DM.
Yeah.
And then there's the fun way, which is I pick what shows up when I cast it, which is not correct. It is our house rule. That's a lot of fun, except that you have to intend. This is the part where it's the prerogative is on you to not power play it. And that can feel real bad to a lot of people. To intentionally say, you know what, I'm going to summon 8 pigs instead of 8 wolves.
That's a thing that I do.
And you can do some really cool RP stuff with that. But the prerogative's on you. And this is one of the very few times in 5th edition that like it's up to the player to keep themselves in order.
To skip a little bit ahead here, to get a little bit out of level, to put it in perspective, conjure woodland beings is similar to conjuring animals, but you conjure a bunch of like minor fey creatures. If you're really trying to power play that and you're allowed to pick what you get, you can summon 8 pixies or 8 sprites. So if you take the 8 pixies, for example, you can have all of those pixies use their spell Polymorph, which has a very low DC. When you have 8 things throwing Polymorph out, odds are that one of them is going to connect because of just kind of an unlucky roll on whenever you're attacking, which is very unfun and it's game breaking and it's just.
Well, what's even more interesting is Conjure Woodland Beings is a 4th level spell, and Polymorph is a 4th level spell. Druids do not have a 4th level spell that says cast 8 4th level spells. That's not what the spell says. That's one of their class features, actually. My point.
That's how land balances out.
Our point is there are some of these Druid specific spells, specifically the conjuration abilities. There's a lot of finesse. You need, as a dungeon master, to really sit down and read it. And as a player, you need to not try and take advantage, especially if your dungeon master is new. The prerogative is just on you to be a good sport about it and play fair. Because if you're outclassing everyone else in your party by miles, they're not going to have any fun.
Yeah.
And especially if you're doing it by cheating, which now you know it's cheating. I'm looking at you.
Yeah, now you all know. Now you all know you can't do the thing you thought you could. So, in that case, level 6? Or did you have another? I think you had one more you said you wanted to talk about at level 5.
Oh, yeah, Call Lightning. You summon a big thunderstorm in the air and call on lightning. It's super freaking cool. That's all.
Yeah, as mentioned before, it's more powerful if you're in a thunderstorm, which is very much the druid's identity, and that's pretty rad.
Super important to note, too. If you are a moon druid, you cannot cast spells when you are in your beast form. However, because Call Lightning is an ongoing spell, if you have cast Call Lightning before becoming a bear, you can call down lightning strikes as a fucking bear. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yep.
It's real.
Yeah, it's pretty rad.
I highly recommend.
So level 6. Level 6, you get another 3rd level spell slot, whatever, and then you get another circle feature. Moon and Land, I don't think either of these features are all that cool. What Moon gets, it's just kind of a quality of life buff. Your beast shapes, their natural weapons now do magic damage. So when you're a bear, you can start hitting ghosts, and you don't have to worry about that resistance. They need that ability because of the way 5e is designed, but it's not like I never get super pumped up that I can now, punch stuff with that resistance.
Yeah, it would just mean like you can no longer use this ability anymore if you didn't have it.
And land druids get a thing called land stride. It allows them to move through non-magical, difficult terrain without expending any extra movement. You can move through plants without being slowed by them and without taking damage if they have things like thorns or spines or any kind of comparable hazard. And your saving throws against plants that are magically created or manipulated to impede movement have advantage, such as if you get entangled, you have advantage against that. It sounds like a lot. It's all very niche. I never actually
really make you stronger. It's one of those abilities that you get. You're like, oh, cool, I'll remember this, and you forget. So that if it does ever come up, you don't even remember you have it, and unfortunate for the design.
And maybe you do, but. Yeah, it's not a lot of effect, and it's again very niche. If I was a DM, and I had to play with land circle, I would intentionally go out of my way at some point during the game to be like, oh yes, this thing conjures plants, and then tell them that they had land stride so they could use it. And that's kind of, I think, the only way that it would come up naturally.
Yeah, and actually, we got a great comment in chat from Trans Kitten. There's an app you can get for the phone called 5th Edition Spellbook. It's pretty handy. It absolutely is, especially for those more complicated spells. Having the spell on hand, very the text of it, very helpful. Maybe bookmark it in the old player's handbook or whatever. And yeah, it's just very good to have for stuff like conjure animals, having that on hand. But speaking of conjure animals, conjure within beings, a spell Pete mentioned earlier, you're going to get at 7th level when you unlock 4th level spells. Some great 4th level spells, and I'm going to just list all of them because they're all great. Are Blight, an ability that lets you draw all of the water from your foe, leaving them a shriveled husk.
Sick one.
Confusion, which makes people run around like goons. Conjure minor elementals, which is a weird conjuration ability, which can be good or not. It's very strange. It's got a lot of funny rules text about what elementals show up and why based on your environment. So you want to have that spell open to read.
I don't think I've ever read that spell before.
Yeah, I used it once in your campaign, Pete, in the library. Conjure woodland beings, conjure water, dominate beast. Dominate beast is cool. It lets you just mind control a beast like a bear or something, which is neat. Freedom of movement, an excellent support ability. Giant insect, which is a really weird thing, but it lets you turn regular insects into giant insects.
Cast big B.
Big B. Grasping vine, which is a super useful ability that lets you create a vine, which every turn can grab and move things around. They can help move people, move enemies, move objects. It's just helpful. Hallucinatory terrain, which is a strange illusion ability, and I'm not sure why the druid gets it. Ice storm, which allows you to create a storm where giant ice balls fall out of the sky. It's great and bludgeon people.
It's because it has the word terrain in it, Jeremy.
You're right. My bad. Locate creature, which is just a more versatile version of locate animals and plants you got earlier.
Yep.
Polymorph, we mentioned that, which lets you polymorph a person into a different person or not person. That was a good description of polymorph. Stone
Yeah,
Skin, which is really not a good ability at all, and Wall of Fire, which is sick. You conjure a big wall of fire and it burns people. Yeah.
So yeah, those are the spells. They're all cool. I really highlights for me at least: Polymorph, Blight, Confusion, all really good spells that feel like they have big impact when you use them. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. And that's it for level 7.
Most campaigns are over by now. Congratulations, you're playing a new character at this point. But if you're one of those strange people like me and Pete, who
actually
pushed up through level 20 in Druid.
20 plus.
Pete, tell me what I got. I don't remember.
Yes. Here's what you get after level 7. Almost everything you're going to get is going to be higher level spells and ability score increases, but there are a couple of extra things that you can do. You're going to get flying beasts at level 8. That is an excellent thing. It's fun. It feels great. You can now become a giant eagle. Even actually, we forgot to mention this. Land Druid, the challenge rating increases as you go through. Still, not as much as Moon Druid does, but at level 8, you can now become the bear that the Moon Druid can become at level 2. So Land Druid does get some better beast shapes at this point. So they could become a giant eagle, just as the Moon Druid could, once they get to level 8 and get all those fly speeds. As a lot of utility, it's fun. I like being birds. It's the best cool kind of like low level, the last cool low level ability. Now we're at the mid levels. At level 10, there is another circle. There's another circle feature. What the Land Druid gets, it's another kind of niche. It's another kind of niche resistance. Land Druid gets immunity to charm and fear effects from Fey and Elementals, as well as immunity to poison and disease. So you get a damage immunity, which is probably the most significant thing out of that. If you're playing a campaign that is heavily centered around, like, say, the Feywild, that immunity to charms is actually really significant. But again, that all is just kind of dependent on the style of the campaign that you're running and the, just the nature of the world that you're in.
It's interesting that it says that, because I'm not sure there's an elemental that has a fear effect.
Yeah, neither do I. Maybe there's, maybe they got big plans. Look out in the future. You heard it here first.
You can cast the spell. No. Anyway,
you heard it here first. There's going to be lots of fear-based elementals soon.
You get immunity to a thing that doesn't exist.
On the subject of elementals, the Fade Charm will be the big one there. On the subject of elementals, though, Moon Druid can now become elementals: water elemental, air elemental, earth elemental, fire elemental. Those 4. However, instead of their normal beast shape, it costs both uses of beast shape to become one of them. But they're all very powerful, and they offer also a wide range of utility. For example, the air elemental has a ton of flying speed. The earth elemental has earth glide, so they can like go underground and just sink into the earth and like tunnel without even leaving a tunnel behind them. The fire elemental has naturally fire immunity, so if you're fighting something that utilizes fire in a major way, odds are they have fire immunity too, but you can make yourself invulnerable to them. It's a lot of it's really cool. It's fun becoming elementals. It's another great feature that Moon gets. It's a more, I think, reasonable feature for the level that they're at than it was for them to become a bear like before. I like that ability a lot personally.
Yeah, it feels really good at the level. It's impactful, but not overbearing.
Yes.
And it feels very good.
Wait, Farku says there's a fear elemental. I feel like that's a joke.
I'm not certain. I
am not familiar with this thing.
I don't know.
I'm not familiar with this thing. If it is link or it didn't happen in DnDTime Discord.
Wink, Avalon, you caught me. But yeah,
I didn't catch you.
I didn't mean that. Avalon, you have found wisdom in my delirium. More abilities at level 14. You are gonna get some more generic abilities that really aren't that important. They're cool, they're flavor abilities, but neither of them are the reason you picked to play Druid.
Well, I like the Moon one actually, personally.
I guess
the Moon you get Alter Self at will as a Moon Druid. So Alter Self is kind of like a buffed up disguise self. You can't change your outward appearance, but the changes actually happen. You can change your, the physical appearance to reflect a different race. Yeah, you give yourself gills so you can now just breathe underwater all the time. I think that's a cool one. The Land Druid gets a thing that makes it so beasts and plants won't attack them, but odds are you're not fighting beasts and plants anymore at level 14.
That's very true. Otherwise, there's some funky beasts and plants.
Upgraded.
You get something called Timeless Body, where you no longer age. Both druids get this, and it is definitely more of a epilogue RP kind of thing, unless something really funky is happening in your campaign, or it's only aged naturally as well. So like, it doesn't do anything against sphinxes or enemies that could age you.
Yeah.
So it's really just an RP ability. And you gain the ability to cast spells while in your beast form. That one's actually very cool.
That's a very good effect.
It just feels like you should have been able to do that for 18th level by now.
Also, I think it was way back a long time ago. I think it was Ive or someone mentioned that was a land thing, and that was the thing that land got that made them cool. It's actually a both thing. You get to do that as a Moon Druid.
And then at level 20, you get what Pete thinks is the best capstone in the game.
But obviously you disagree with. In that case, can I do it?
Please.
I love capstones. I think that this is the best capstone in the game, the most exciting of all of them. And I guess I'm only counting that as true, assuming that you are a Moon Druid. But that capstone is, you can now use your beast shape at will. You can use your beast shape as much as you want. Let that sink in, because that means that those elemental forms as a Moon Druid that you have, you can do that as often as you want. So for one, as a bonus action, since you're Moon Druid, you have the bonus action now. That means you can switch between all these different things and have all these cool powers, but you also essentially have a refresh on your health. That is, if you're an Earth Elemental, I think it's like 80 something, I can't remember off the top of my head, but basically there's a bonus action every turn. You can get the equivalent of 80 temporary hit points. And I might be exaggerating on the health, I'm not entirely sure.
No, it's pretty impactful. It's cool, and it's very cool. The problem is, you get those elemental forms at level 10, and by the time you hit level 20, they've fallen off. They're really not as impactful. Your beast forms do not scale with their to hit with your proficiency bonus, which is a core mechanic built into 5th edition. They just have a flat to hit that never changes. And so, yes, you have tons of hit points at level 20, becoming an Earth Elemental every turn, but you're never going to hit. Against that Tarask, you're going to hit with an 18 or higher, and that's it.
Yeah, the thing that is not effective about it, for sure, is not the combat and the battle. It's just that extra pool of health, because you can now cast spells while you're that thing.
That's true.
So you can still be shooting off all of your high level nukes, which, I forgot to talk about Storm of Vengeance. Look at Storm of Vengeance. It's really silly and it's not very good, but it's cool. Every turn, and they got kind of bored after 5 turns. Yeah, it's sick if you're fighting an army. Basically, it's every turn a different big storm effect happens for 5 turns, and then there's 5 regular turns of regular storm. It's fun. Look at it. I really love that spell.
It's pretty sweet.
I wish. Yeah, it's good. That's it.
Yeah,
I think that's it.
Basically it. The druids, play them. They're actually pretty cool. But
yeah, I like the druid a lot.
Yeah, be a Moon Druid, or if you want to be a Land Druid, that's cool. But don't play a Land Druid and expect to be the best spellcaster in your party if you have other spellcasters in your party. If you have no spellcasters in your party, be a Land Druid, and you're gonna feel like a badass because you can cast spells and no one else can.
Also, we did not mention these because we never do, but the Xanathars offered 2 pretty cool Druid subclasses that you can check out.
Oh, they're so cool.
Yeah, I really adore. We don't allow it in D&D time because summoning takes too long, but I adore the Shepherd, and the Dreams Druid is also great. So check those out if you get a chance.
And without further ado, or I guess to end the stream, or not end the stream, but to end the DnDTime talk about the Druid, thank you, everybody who stopped by to listen.
Absolutely.
Thank you for, let me I don't have this open because I am a bad streamer. Because we had a new follow today, and that was the dear Angel Rose 777. God bless you, and thank you for following us.
Thank you very much, Angel Rose 777.
And to everyone else, tell your friends about D&D Time. We have an exciting Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time adventure this Friday. We're back on schedule and back on.
Yeah, come check out Friday. For any of you who aren't already aware that we do this every Friday, we run Pete and Jeremy's D&D Time, where we run a bunch of one-shot adventures with our viewers. Do 3 of them a night. You can play with them if you watch the stream. Priority for newer players. So if you're intimidated, you can just hop right in and play. You don't have to there's not like a huge waiting period to get started on it. Check it out. It's fun.
It's a lot of fun, and I think this Friday is going to be a particularly good. Well, they're all particularly good, but this is going to be particularly more also good. I'm doing this thing where I'm leaning toward my webcam, and I don't think it's a good thing. We're going to stop doing that.
And all the information that you need to get involved is beneath the stream here. Links to Twitter, links to our website, everything. So with that, Jeremy, I think that's all.
What was that, Pete? You stopped making sound on my computer.
Oh, I was just saying that there's links to all the stuff that you can do to get involved with our stream underneath the screen here, and that I think that's all.
That's the part where you stop talking. I think you're trying to say that's all we got. So, with that, I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Pete.
And this is
DnDTime Talks.
Hey, we did it right this time.
Maybe we did it right. I want to listen to see how